Imagine being condemned before you even take your first breath. Esau's story is not just one of sibling rivalry or lost opportunities. It's a tale marked by divine prophecy, heartbreak, and ultimate redemption. How can someone be hated by God before they are born? It's a question that challenges our understanding of fairness, destiny, and free will. Esau's life was shaped by forces beyond his control, yet his choices played a pivotal role in his downfall. This story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about fate, family, and the power of decisions. But Esau's journey is also a mirror to our own lives. How often do we find ourselves at the crossroads of destiny and desire, making choices that ripple far into the future? Esau's impulsive decisions led to consequences that would haunt him for years, and yet, in the end, there is a glimmer of hope, a moment of reconciliation that shows the strength of forgiveness. In a world that often feels predetermined, Esau's life challenges us to question whether we are truly in control of our paths or simply players in a story written long before we arrived. Is it possible that Esau's story holds a key to understanding our own struggles with fate and free will? Can his experience teach us how to navigate the complexities of life's choices and find peace, even when it seems we've lost everything? As we delve into the history of Esau, you'll discover not just the tale of a man who was hated by God, but a journey that reflects the very struggles we all face: betrayal, loss, and ultimately redemption. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn might just change the way you see your own life. The story of Esau begins intensely even before his birth. Imagine this: two children were already destined to shape the future of an entire nation, and they hadn't even left the womb. Isaac and Rebekah, their parents, received a prophecy that the elder Esau would serve the younger Jacob. Life is curious, isn't it? From the very beginning, these two lives were intertwined in a way that few could understand. It seems that even at birth, destiny was already at work, showing that things are not always as we expect. And it wasn't just a simple prophecy, but a message that would change the course of both their histories. When Esau finally was born, he came into the world first, but Jacob, curious and determined, held onto his heel as if to say, "Wait, I'm right behind you." This moment symbolizes much of what was to come, showing how both would compete for everything, from birth to the final blessing. It's intriguing to think about how a person's life can be shaped even before taking their first breath, don't you think? Esau may not have even known the weight he carried from that first cry. This dynamic between the brothers, with Esau in front and Jacob right behind, would echo throughout their lives. And here's a reflection. How many times have we found ourselves in a situation where, unknowingly, we are connected to something greater than we can understand? How many times has a small action at the start of our journey defined what comes next? Esau and Jacob are a clear example of this. And if you've ever experienced moments like that, where you felt something bigger was at stake, then you've already had a glimpse of what was to come in Esau's story. But things are going to intensify even more as we get to know these two brothers better. Esau grew up to be a man of action, someone who thrived in the wilderness, a skilled hunter who felt most alive when he was chasing game. His hands were rough from handling his bow and arrow, and his strength was evident in every move he made. However, despite his physical prowess, there was something missing in Esau's heart. While he lived in the moment and followed his impulses, he often neglected the deeper, more spiritual aspects of life. He was driven by his immediate desires, and that became a defining part of his character. We all know someone like this, don't we? People who are so caught up in the thrill of the now that they overlook what truly matters. But Esau's impulsive nature wasn't just about hunting. It spilled over into other areas of his life as well. He was a man of strong emotions, quick to act on whatever he felt at the moment. If he was hungry, he ate. If he was angry, he lashed out. There wasn't much thought about the long-term consequences. This kind of behavior can lead to trouble, and as we'll see later, it certainly did for Esau. His lack of foresight made him vulnerable to making choices that would cost him dearly in the long run. In today's world, how many times do we see people making rash decisions without thinking of the future? It's a lesson worth paying attention to. Esau's life offers a valuable lesson. Strength and skill can get you far, but without wisdom, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. In a world that often celebrates quick wins and immediate gratification, Esau reminds us of the importance of balance. His character flaws were not uncommon, but they were amplified by the choices he made. And in the next part of this story, we'll see how those choices begin to catch up with him, starting with a simple yet fateful decision. In contrast to Esau, Jacob was a completely different personality. Where Esau was impulsive and brash, Jacob was thoughtful, quiet, and calculated. He spent most of his time at home, learning from his mother and paying close attention to the family's heritage and traditions. Jacob valued what others might take for granted, like the birthright and the spiritual legacy that came with it. From an early age, Jacob demonstrated that he wasn't just thinking about today, he was planning for the future. His strategic mind was always at work, considering what moves he could make to secure a better tomorrow. Jacob's quieter nature didn't mean he lacked ambition. In fact, he was perhaps more ambitious than his brother. While Esau was out hunting, Jacob was observing, learning, and plotting. It's interesting to note how people who seem quiet and reserved often have an internal drive that pushes them forward. Jacob was no exception. He wasn't just content with what life had given him. He wanted more. And unlike Esau, he understood that some things required patience and cunning rather than brute force. In today's world, we might think of Jacob as someone who played the long game, always keeping his eyes on the bigger prize. Now, here's the thing about Jacob. He was willing to take risks, but in a calculated way. He didn't act on impulse like Esau, but he wasn't afraid to step up when the opportunity presented itself. It's a valuable trait, isn't it? Knowing when to act and when to wait. Jacob had the wisdom to understand that some victories weren't won in the heat of the moment, but rather through patience and perseverance. This mindset set him apart from his brother, who often saw things only at face value. And while this made Jacob appear more reserved, it also gave him the edge in situations where foresight was required. Jacob's ambition, however, didn't come without its flaws. While he was strategic, his methods were sometimes questionable. He wasn't above deceit if it meant getting what he wanted. This is where things get complicated. On the one hand, Jacob represents the power of wisdom and long-term planning. On the other hand, his tactics sometimes strayed into manipulation. It's a reminder that ambition, while powerful, needs to be tempered with integrity. Jacob's story is a reflection of this delicate balance. He teaches us that having a plan is crucial, but the means by which we achieve our goals matter just as much. When we think about modern life, there's a lot to learn from Jacob's approach. In a fast-paced world where immediate success is often glorified, Jacob's story highlights the importance of thinking ahead and not being afraid to play the long game. It's easy to get caught up in the rush of the moment, but as Jacob shows us, sometimes it's the quiet, patient ones who win in the end. This doesn't mean that Jacob didn't face challenges. Far from it. But his resilience and willingness to adapt made him a force to be reckoned with, even if his methods weren't always straightforward. Jacob also knew the value of inheritance, not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of spiritual legacy. He understood that what was passed down from one generation to the next held great importance. In today's world, we might think of this as the values, principles, and knowledge that shape who we are and what we pass on to our children. Jacob was acutely aware of this, and it fueled much of his ambition. He wasn't just looking for material gain. He was focused on securing something deeper, something that would last beyond his lifetime. Jacob's relationship with his mother, Rebekah, played a significant role in shaping his character. She saw in Jacob what Isaac saw in Esau, a future leader. Their bond was strong, and it's clear that she guided him in many of his decisions, including the ones that would later cause tension between the brothers. But that's a topic for another time. For now, what stands out is how Jacob's relationship with Rebekah gave him the confidence to pursue his ambitions, even if it meant going against societal norms. As we move forward, we'll begin to see how Jacob's character traits set him on a collision course with his brother. His strategic thinking, combined with his ambition, will lead him to make choices that forever alter the dynamic between the two. And in the next part of this story, We'll explore how their parents' preferences further fueled the tension between Esau and Jacob. In every family, there's often a dynamic where parents may unintentionally show favoritism toward one child over another. In the case of Esau and Jacob, this favoritism was stark. Isaac, their father, had a strong preference for Esau, admiring his physical strength and hunting skills. Esau represented everything Isaac valued in a man: strength, adventure, and the ability to provide. This bond between father and son was built on shared values, but it also overlooked some of Esau's flaws. Isaac, perhaps blinded by his admiration, ignored Esau's impulsive nature, which would later lead to significant problems. On the other hand, Rebekah's connection with Jacob was deeper and more spiritual. She saw in Jacob what Isaac failed to notice: the quiet strength, the intellect, and the spiritual sensitivity that would guide him toward the birthright. Rebekah believed that Jacob was destined for something greater, and she nurtured this belief throughout his life. Her guidance played a pivotal role in shaping Jacob's decisions, especially as the story unfolds. You can see how this division in parental preferences set the stage for future conflicts. How many times have we seen families where favoritism leads to tension and resentment? This is no different. This split in parental attention created a growing divide between the brothers. Esau, though favored by his father, lacked the spiritual guidance that Jacob received from Rebekah. And as we'll see in the coming events, this division had a direct impact on the choices both brothers made. It's a classic tale of two parents, two brothers, and two very different paths. And speaking of choices, we'll soon explore one of the most fateful decisions in Esau's life. The moment that truly defined Esau's impulsive nature came when he traded his birthright to Jacob for something as simple as a bowl of lentil stew. It's hard to believe, right? But this moment is a powerful reminder of how immediate desires can cloud long-term vision. Esau, returning from a hunt, was famished, and in that state of hunger, nothing else seemed to matter. His birthright, which held immense value both materially and spiritually, became secondary to his immediate craving. This decision reveals just how little Esau valued his inheritance compared to his present needs. We've all been in situations where we've made quick decisions based on how we feel in the moment, without considering the lasting consequences. Jacob, on the other hand, was fully aware of the weight of the birthright. This wasn't just about material wealth or power. It was about spiritual leadership and the continuation of the family legacy. Jacob saw an opportunity, and without hesitation, he made the offer: the birthright in exchange for food. It might seem like a cunning move, but Jacob understood the value of what he was offering versus what he would gain. This is where we see the stark contrast between the brothers. One was driven by his immediate needs, the other by foresight and strategy. It's a lesson in how we prioritize what's important in life. The exchange of the birthright wasn't just a simple trade. It symbolized the divergence of their futures. Esau's disregard for something so valuable showed that he lacked the vision necessary to carry on the family's spiritual legacy. Jacob, however, was ready to step into that role, even if it meant acquiring it through unconventional means. In today's world, we can think of this moment as the difference between chasing short-term pleasures and investing in long-term success. And just like Esau, we've all been faced with moments where we've had to choose between what feels good now and what will benefit us in the future. This moment in the history of Esau is crucial because it sets the stage for the deeper conflict between the brothers. Esau's choice was irreversible, and the consequences of this impulsive decision would follow him for the rest of his life. It's a powerful reminder that every choice we make, no matter how small it seems at the time, can have lasting effects. And as we move forward, we'll see how this exchange led to even greater tension between Esau and Jacob, culminating in one of the most significant acts of deception in their story. One of the most dramatic moments in the story of Esau and Jacob is the deception that took place when Jacob, with Rebekah's help, stole Esau's blessing from their father, Isaac. Isaac, now old and nearly blind, wanted to bestow his blessing on Esau before he died, as Esau was his firstborn and the rightful heir. But Rebekah, knowing the prophecy that the older would serve the younger, devised a plan. Jacob, who had already acquired the birthright, was now set to take Esau's blessing as well. With Rebekah's guidance, Jacob disguised himself as Esau, covering his hands with animal fur to mimic Esau's hairy skin and wearing his brother's clothes to smell like him. It's hard to imagine the tension in the room as Jacob stood before Isaac, pretending to be Esau. Isaac, though suspicious at first, eventually believed the deception and blessed Jacob, passing on the inheritance that was meant for Esau. This moment not only shows Jacob's cunning but also highlights the lengths Rebekah was willing to go to ensure her favorite son received the blessing. The blessing was no small matter. It wasn't just words. It was the spiritual and material authority over the family's future. And in this one act, Jacob secured both the birthright and the blessing, leaving Esau with nothing. When Esau returned from the field, having prepared the meal his father requested, he quickly realized what had happened. His devastation was palpable. The birthright was one thing, but the blessing, something that could not be undone, was now lost to him forever. In a fit of anguish, Esau begged his father for a blessing, but Isaac had already given the primary one to Jacob. This act of deception cut deep, not only because it was a betrayal by his brother, but because it sealed Esau's fate in a way that could not be reversed. Esau's reaction was not just anger, it was a profound sense of loss and betrayal. This moment is a turning point in the history of Esau. The deception not only deepened the divide between the brothers, but it also set Esau on a path of revenge. Jacob had now taken everything from him. First his birthright and now his blessing. For Esau, the future looked bleak, and his bitterness grew. This act of trickery is a reminder of how deceit can destroy relationships, especially when it involves something as significant as family inheritance. As we move forward, we'll see just how far Esau's anger would push him and the lengths Jacob would go to protect himself from the consequences of this fateful act. When Esau learned that Jacob had stolen his blessing, the emotional storm that followed was intense. His initial shock quickly turned into a seething rage. This wasn't just about losing a birthright or a blessing. It was about losing his identity and his future. The blessing was more than just words. It was his inheritance, his position in the family, and his future prosperity. Esau, now filled with anger and bitterness, vowed to kill Jacob for what he had done. It's a powerful moment, showcasing how betrayal can push someone to the brink of their emotions, blurring the line between right and wrong. Esau's vow wasn't an empty threat. He fully intended to carry out his plan. In that moment of rage, his thoughts were consumed by revenge. And honestly, can we blame him? After all, everything he had expected for his future had been stripped away by the deceit of his brother. It's easy to see why Esau would feel justified in seeking vengeance. Yet, this reaction is a reminder of how powerful anger can be when left unchecked. It can consume us, leading us down paths that we might not have otherwise chosen. How many times have we seen people, in moments of rage, make decisions they later regret? Jacob, sensing the danger, fled. His mother, Rebekah, urged him to leave immediately and seek refuge with her brother, Laban, far away from Esau's wrath. This flight marked the beginning of Jacob's long journey away from home, and it was clear that the relationship between the brothers had been irreparably damaged. Esau's vow hung over Jacob like a dark cloud, and the fear of retribution was something Jacob would carry with him for years. This tension between them became a central part of their story, showing just how deeply betrayal can wound, even between family members. Esau's reaction also gives us insight into the emotional toll of being wronged by someone close. His vow wasn't just about vengeance. It was about reclaiming a sense of justice for what had been taken from him. But revenge, as we often see in life, is a double-edged sword. It can provide a sense of temporary relief, but it rarely brings true closure. Esau's life from this point forward would be marked by this bitterness, shaping many of his decisions and relationships. And while his anger was understandable, it also kept him trapped in the past, unable to move forward fully. As we look at this story from a broader perspective, it's a reminder of how betrayal, anger, and revenge can cloud our judgment. Esau's vow may have felt justified, but it also set him on a path that would take years to resolve. The fallout from this event affected not only him but also his entire family. And as we move forward, We'll explore how Esau's marriages and his attempts to rebuild his life became part of his journey to find peace and perhaps some form of reconciliation with his past. After the betrayal and Jacob's escape, Esau began to make decisions that reflected both his rebellion against his family's values and his desire to carve out his own path. One of the most significant ways this manifested was through his marriages. Esau married two Hittite women, Judith and Basemath, who were not part of the covenant family. This deeply displeased Isaac and Rebekah, as the Hittites were known for their different religious practices and cultural values. Esau's choice of wives symbolized a departure from the spiritual heritage that his family held dear, almost as if he were rejecting everything they stood for. Esau's marriages were a reflection of his impulsive nature once again. Instead of seeking counsel or considering the spiritual implications of his decisions, he acted on his desires. In today's world, we might think of this as choosing relationships based purely on attraction or convenience, without considering how those relationships align with our deeper values and goals. Esau's decisions hurt his parents, especially Rebekah, who had hoped that her sons would continue the family's spiritual legacy. It's a reminder that our choices, particularly in relationships, have ripple effects that can extend far beyond ourselves. In an attempt to mend the rift caused by his earlier decisions, Esau later married a daughter of Ishmael, one of Abraham's other descendants. This move was likely an effort to reconnect with his family's heritage, but by then, the damage had been done. Esau's marriages reflected a pattern of acting on impulse and later trying to correct course, a pattern we've seen throughout his life. His attempts to make things right, while sincere, were often too little, too late. How many times have we made decisions in the heat of the moment, only to realize afterward that we need to backtrack and fix the consequences? Despite these missteps, Esau did manage to build a legacy of his own. He became the father of the Edomites, a nation that would have a complex relationship with the descendants of Jacob. Though Esau's choices distanced him from his family, he still played a significant role in shaping future generations. His legacy, however, was forever marked by his impulsive decisions and the tension with his brother. It's a complex story, one of both rebellion and reconciliation, mistakes and attempts at redemption. Esau's life reminds us that while we may stray from our intended path, there's always an opportunity to rebuild and leave a lasting mark, even if it's not in the way we originally envisioned. Esau's legacy, much like his life, was a mix of triumph and struggle. His marriages to the Hittites, in particular, represent how our personal decisions can lead to long-lasting consequences, not just for ourselves but for those around us. These choices alienated him from his parents and from the spiritual heritage he had grown up with. But his later attempt to connect with Ishmael's lineage showed a man trying to correct course, trying to reconcile his past mistakes with a new future. It's a story many of us can relate to. How often do we act impulsively, only to later seek ways to repair the damage we've caused? As we move forward, we'll see that despite the fractured relationships and missteps, Esau wasn't without redemption. His reunion with Jacob later in life would offer a glimpse of the healing that can come, even after years of bitterness and separation. But before we get there, we must explore how the years apart shaped both brothers and led them back to one another. Years after the betrayal and their separation, Esau and Jacob's lives took very different paths. While Jacob had fled to build a life far from Esau's wrath, the time eventually came for the brothers to meet again. This reunion wasn't just a simple family gathering. It was a moment fraught with tension, fear, and uncertainty. Jacob, now with a family of his own, was terrified of what Esau might do after all those years of resentment. He remembered Esau's vow to kill him and feared that Esau still held that grudge. As Jacob approached with his family, he sent gifts ahead, hoping to appease Esau and soften his anger. But when Esau finally saw Jacob, something remarkable happened. Instead of confronting his brother with anger, Esau ran to him, embraced him, and wept. This act of forgiveness was powerful and unexpected. It's a reminder of the human capacity for healing, even when the wounds are deep. Esau, who had every reason to hold on to his bitterness, chose instead to let it go. This moment of reconciliation wasn't just about the brothers. It was about the possibility of redemption and the healing that can come with time. How often do we carry grudges, only to realize later that forgiveness brings far more peace than holding on to anger. Esau's forgiveness wasn't just for Jacob's sake, it was for his own. Holding on to anger for years can poison the soul, and in that moment of reconciliation, Esau found release. It's a powerful lesson for anyone who has experienced betrayal or deep hurt. While the scars may remain, choosing to forgive allows for a fresh start, a chance to move forward without the weight of the past dragging us down. Esau's actions show that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It takes courage to forgive, especially when the pain runs deep. The reunion between Esau and Jacob wasn't without its complexities. Though they reconciled, their lives remained separate afterward. They didn't return to being close brothers, but the animosity was no longer there. It's a reminder that reconciliation doesn't always mean things go back to how they were before. Sometimes, the best outcome is simply finding peace and moving on with separate lives. For Esau, this was enough. He had found his own path, built his own legacy, and no longer needed to hold on to the bitterness of the past. And for Jacob, this moment was a resolution to years of fear and guilt. Esau's ability to forgive Jacob is a lesson in personal growth and maturity. It's easy to see him as the wronged brother throughout much of the history of Esau, but this final act of forgiveness reveals a depth to his character that we may not have seen before. Life had taught him that holding on to grudges only hurts oneself. In letting go, Esau not only freed Jacob but also freed himself. It's a powerful reminder that forgiveness, while difficult, is often the key to moving forward in life. We may not forget the wrongs done to us, but we can choose how we let them affect our future. As their paths diverged, Esau and Jacob remained figures tied together by fate, but no longer by conflict. Esau's legacy, while marked by the early strife, found its resolution in this act of grace. And as we conclude the story of Esau and Jacob, we are left with the knowledge that even the most intense family conflicts can find resolution, if we are willing to forgive. But the question remains, how do we take these lessons from Esau's story and apply them to our own lives? What steps can we take to ensure we, too, can find peace and reconciliation in the face of past betrayals? As we reach the end of Esau's story, we're left with more than just the tale of a man who lost everything. It's a reflection of the choices we all face, the moments when we act on impulse, the times we let anger or bitterness guide us, and the opportunities for reconciliation that we either embrace or ignore. Esau's life was marked by betrayal and impulsive decisions, but in the end, it was also marked by forgiveness. His journey teaches us that, no matter how far we stray from our intended path, there's always a chance to make things right, even if it's not in the way we initially imagined. Now, I want to ask you, how many times have you found yourself at a crossroads like Esau? Are there people in your life you still need to forgive, or decisions you've made that need to be revisited? If Esau, who was hated before he was even born, could find peace, what's stopping you from finding the same? The power of choice is yours, whether it's about letting go of the past or taking control of your future. As you reflect on Esau's story, I encourage you to take the lessons to heart. Start applying them today. And if this has resonated with you, don't miss out on more insights like these. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can continue to grow and learn. There's so much more to uncover, and together, we can dive deeper into these life-changing lessons.